The Tolkien Road, Episode 76, Akallabêth, Part 1. Alright, go ahead. The Tolkien Road, 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 the Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, a long walk through the works and philosophy of J.R.R. Tolkien. On this episode, we begin our look at Akallabêth, the story of Númenór's rise and fall. Before we get started, why not hop on over to iTunes and leave the Tolkien Road a rating and feedback? It's a great way to show your support for the show and takes less than a minute. Thanks for listening and enjoy. Alright, welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 76, Akallabêth. Akallabêth, Part 1.
Emphasis on the eth.
Akallabêth.
Yes.
With the circumflex. That is a circumflex.
Oh,
I'm trying to make
that weird sound has a fancy name, huh?
Well, the weird character thingamajig.
Oh.
Greta, what's up?
Not much. What's up with you?
Not much, but I asked you first.
Oh, I thought it was a rhetorical question.
Well, and you answered it.
So, okay.
I asked you the rhetorical question first.
Oh.
Whatever.
Alright. Well, I'm confused.
I was just born confused. Okay. Who am I? Where am I going? Okay. Alright. So yeah, we're talking about Akallabêth. Akallabêth, which is well, I don't know if you can really call it the sequel, but it's the next step. It's the story. It's part of the story of the Second Age, a major part of the story of the Second Age. So, the Silmarillion, the story of the First Age. Men come into that story a little bit late in the First Age, and Akallabêth is the story of like the good men and how their legacy continues on. But so we did all the Silmarillion already on the show. No, we haven't done Akallabêth. And so we're going to do Akallabêth now. And it's going to take us 2, maybe 3 episodes. We'll just see how far we get in this episode tonight.
Okay.
But before we dive into Akallabêth itself, wanted to, so we had Josh, superfan Josh Sosa finally shared with us his thoughts on Fellowship, on Peter Jackson's Fellowship. He had kind of hinted to me that he didn't completely agree with our assessment of, Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring.
Right, yes.
So I asked him to share his thoughts and that we'd read them on the podcast when he did. So,
you read all that?
Yeah, it's not that long. I'm a fast reader, speed reader. I'm like the Micro Machines guy.
Okay. Looks like you put a lot of thought into it, so I guess it would be worth reading. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, well, I think it would have been kind of wrong to be like, hey, write a whole bunch of stuff and then not read it, We
didn't say write a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, maybe
you could have listed them like in bullets, Like, here are my issues.
He's a bull major like me.
He's a bull major.
Yeah.
Science and math majors never understood you.
I know, you guys are like bullet points, like, okay, guy born, guy dies, the end. Okay, got it. Next question on the quiz. And us bull major types are like, let me consider the 15 different ways in which I might answer that question. Yes, and I'll write 3 paragraphs each for each answer. There's so many. Let's just be straight on what the question even is before we go and answer it. We have to dig deeply into what the question might actually be.
Give me a headache. You need to stop.
All right. Josh and I see eye to eye, so I thought this was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Even though he was disagreeing with us.
Well, even though he's disagreeing with us, he's free to disagree with us a little bit.
A little bit. This does not look like a little bit.
Well, let's hear him out.
Okay, fine.
All right.
I'll sit here and drink my beer.
Evening cars. He knew it was the evening when we were recording this. Amazing. He knew we were going to be recording this in the evening.
Kind of creepy.
Yeah, really creepy. Josh must have like a hidden camera in our recording studio or something like that.
Yikes.
Or it could have just been that he was writing this in the evening when he wrote this to us.
And we just happened to be reading it in the evening while we're recording in the evening.
Yeah, it would have been weird if it was the morning and it said evening cars. Anyway, all right, let's get to this. It's long, like you were saying.
Yes.
All right, evening Carswell. So this will be my quick and short lies email regarding some of my feelings.
See, at least he admits it.
Yeah, it's like he was reading our minds, like he was seeing the future for our conversation here.
That's totally true.
All right, he must have listened to a lot of episodes of our podcast. Okay. So here's this short email regarding some of my feelings on Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring. First, however, let me mention a few things. Like John, Fellowship was my first step into the world of Tolkien. Jackson's Lord of the Rings is the most nominated and successful series in regards to the Oscars, with Return of the King having won all 11 of its nominations. Old Man Willow does have some sort of appearance in the film series, but the event takes place during Merry and Pippin's escape through Fangorn, and he says look for the deleted scene on YouTube. So apparently we need to look that up. But
so it's not in the actual movie?
Well, I guess it didn't make the cut. They filmed it, but it didn't make the cut.
Got it. Okay.
But to me, that's kind of like, that might make me even more mad if Old Man Willow was in Fangorn rather than in, in the Old Forest.
If you're gonna do it right.
That's what I'm saying.
I know.
All right. Howard Shore's music for all three Lord of the Rings films are my favorite soundtracks of all time, even above John Williams' Star Wars soundtracks. That's a big deal. That is. Star Wars might be the most iconic music soundtracks ever, and so that's saying something, especially coming from a Star Wars fan, huge Star Wars fan like Josh, and above Daft Punk's Tron Legacy. Never listened to that one. Might have to give that one a listen.
Daft Punk's pretty daft.
Yeah, Daft Punk is playing at my house. At my house. Dun, 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 dun. That's not even a Daft Punk song.
It's not?
No.
I had one
it's a song about Daft Punk.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I know that song. Yeah.
LCD Sound System.
Yes, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let's see. And so he says Jackson is indeed a New Zealander. Now, as for my opinions on the films, casting. My casting issues aren't huge, but I feel that they are significant when having watched the film and read the book. Legolas, for example, should not have been sort of eye candy or this impossibly acrobatic and graceful fighter.
Lies! He's the reason I watched. No, I'm just kidding.
No, he looks better in Lord of the Rings than in the Hobbit films. While I could tolerate Orlando Bloom, I feel that the character in the films lacked the otherworldliness and earthly nature of the Legolas in the books. I'm confident Orlando Bloom could have succeeded in this portrayal, but I would have accepted someone better as well. Elrond is another with whom I have some issue. I actually loved Hugo Weaving's portrayal, if not that the character was written as a disapproving father first and a weary king second. I'd have to agree that Viggo Mortensen would be my first recasting, since he is, as the Tolkien professor Corey Olsen describes, too pretty and not grimy enough.
Didn't I say something about that?
Yeah.
I think I did.
I think that's kind of a general assessment of him, although I still feel like, I don't know, Viggo Mortensen I feel like does a good job, and I hear that criticism a lot, but and I feel like let's finish what Josh says. Aragorn should be the mix of a rags to riches story and the prodigal son's return, not a character whose major characteristic is his own insecurities. Mm-hmm. I do agree with that. I agree with the portrayal. Mm-hmm. However, I think Viggo Mortensen still could have fulfilled that just fine. Maybe beefed him up a little bit, but done some weightlifting beforehand or something like that. But
yeah,
it should have been Arnold. He should have been Aragorn. Blood eating sausage.
That's how I know it was coming.
Yeah. It should have been Arnold being Aragorn. Arnold the Governator. Okay. I don't know. Arnold Schwarzenegger just popped in here for a second. Sorry, people. We told him to go away. Pushed him out. He's getting old. You can push him out now. All right. The Hobbits. This is less a complaint on the casting and more on how Peter Jackson and company wrote The Hobbits. The films fail at supplying the viewers with the proper understanding of the social dynamic between the hobbits, thus leading Merry and Pippin to be solely comedic characters, even during their heroicness, the irony that Gimli and Legolas are more comedic, or at least humorous in the books. Of course, Frodo and Sam are portrayed well, but there could have been more in Fellowship of the Ring to really flesh out the relationship between an officer, Frodo, and his batsman, Sam. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the social dynamics are missing. You're right, Merry and Pippin are probably a little too comedic in the movie.
Yeah.
Although They are. I mean, they've got their moments in the books too, in their comedic moments. So I don't have a problem if they had been totally serious characters. I wouldn't have a problem with. I would have more of a problem with Jackson, making them more comedic. But they have their moments in the books too. Where they aren't as slapstick certainly in the books as they tended to be,
made out to be
in Jackson's movie.
That's
true.
That is true.
They definitely, all of the hobbits have very like heroic souls, and even though they're small, they're like, and especially like Merry and Pippin, they're always like so willing. They're like we're right there with you, Frodo. Mm-hmm. They're just always ready, ready to stick up for him.
Yep.
The Frodo and Sam thing, they don't come right out and say it, but you can tell that Sam feels somewhat. I mean, he calls him Mr. Frodo in the movies,
yes.
So there is a sense, and there is a bit of a social kind of subservience going on there. It's not made super explicit, but you can sense it.
Enough. No, I agree.
All right, Council of Elrond. The council in the film is very direct and to the point. My problem is that it fails to provide the scope of the danger in Middle-earth. The only topic of discussion is the One Ring, omitting the reasons for Gimli's interest in Moria, why exactly Boromir came to Riverland, the events in Mirkwood, and other events. I feel like having a scene more accurate to the books would have provided better setup for the rest of the film and the following ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the Council of Elrond, so I would have liked to see more of that as well.
Yeah.
And let's see, the Balrog. The Balrog was fine. Hogwash.
Boo.
Sorry I wasn't screaming at you, John, but when I watch Read Fellowship and then read the Silmarillion, I always just picture each Balrog to look differently. Thus, I have no problem at all with the film portrayal. Yeah, mine's just about, like...
It's not shadowy enough.
Exactly. Like, it's too much of, like, a big flamey demon.
Yes. Yes.
And like strong, like big, powerful looking, mean demon. Right. And I feel like it should have just been more on like the ominous kind of shadowy side. It's flame and shadow, so there should have been some flame, but there's not enough shadow. That's the big thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with you.
All right, and then omitted chapters. Sorry, these chapters were incredibly boring for me to read, and I feel like they might have slowed the film down much, or would have become a distraction. I think the best and only way parts of this film might have been done would have been during the escape towards Buckleberry Ferry, where Jackson could have shown Barrow-wights pursuing the hobbits along with the wraiths. This was really long, but I hope you guys will have enjoyed reading what I had to say. I hope to give my opinions for Two Towers and Return of the King when those episodes come up at later dates. And we encourage you to, highly.
Yeah, absolutely.
The omitted chapters. I'm not saying that he would have needed to have to do like every detail of the omitted chapters, but I just feel like Tom Bombadil should have been in there somewhere.
Agreed.
I know that lots of people think Tom Bombadil is like pointless somehow, or that he doesn't have a place, but I feel like he's, and I think Tolkien included him in there for a reason, and I think it's one of the, I think Tom Bombadil as a character is just so mysterious and near and dear to Tolkien's heart that like he just belongs there in some way.
Yeah.
And just to omit him altogether is leave something missing.
Yes.
Leave something missing. But I mean, overall, Josh, it sounds like we agree that they're pretty darn good films. So I think we agree on all that, and probably I think we could have come up with more things we nitpicked if we had gone through. And I for the most part, I agree with what you have to say about everything except for the Balrog. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
You're wrong about the Balrog, Josh. Sorry. I'll arm wrestle you over it. That'll decide who's right. All right. Anyway, no, thanks for sharing, Josh. It's always good to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Akallabêth. So Akallabêth means the Downfallen. Akallabêth means the Downfallen. Akallabêth is a Númenórian word, or Andunaic word. Okay. And it means literally, actually, and I learned this from Ardalambion, which is that website that Gabriel Blanchard told us about, right? Mm-hmm. I went to Ardalambion and looked it up. So in there, it's in the index or the glossary of the Silmarillion, it says Akallabêth means the Downfallen. If you go to Ardalambion and look up Akallabêth, it says she that is fallen. So I take it literally, it means she that is fallen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Akallabêth can mean the Downfallen or she that is fallen, more literally. And it is a Númenórian word.
Interesting.
So that's where the title. So literally, when you're reading Akallabêth, just saying the Downfallen, right?
Okay.
I wanted to just level set a bit with, on what this is all about by reading a little bit from the Waldman letter. As you'll recall, the Waldman letter is we did our very first episode may have been on the Waldman letter.
Oh, it's like the intro, right?
Right. It's a letter he wrote in the early 50s to a man named Milt Waldman, and he just basically talks about the whole history of Middle Earth and what the different parts are about.
Right. Yes.
So on page XVIII, Roman numeral 18, Tolkien says this, a bit of a long paragraph, but bear with me. The next cycle deals with the Second Age, but it is on Earth a dark age, and not very much of its history is or need be told. In the great battles against the first enemy, the lands were broken and ruined, and the west of Middle-earth became desolate. We learn that the exiled elves were, if not commanded, at least sternly counseled to return into the west, and there be at peace. They were not to dwell permanently in Valinor again, but in the lonely isle of Eärendil within sight of the Blessed Realm. The men of the three houses were rewarded for their valor and faithful alliance by being allowed to dwell westernmost of all mortals in the great Atlantis Isle of Númenór. The doom or gift of God, of mortality, the gods, of course, cannot abrogate, but the Númenóreans have a great span of life. They set sail and leave Middle-earth, and establish a great kingdom of mariners just within furthest sight of Eärendil, but not of Valinor. Most of the High Elves depart also back into the west. Not all. Jump down a bit. In the Silmarillion and Tales of the First Age, Sauron was a being of Valinor, perverted to the service of the enemy and becoming his chief captain and servant. He repents in fear when the first enemy is utterly defeated, but in the end does not go as was commanded, return to the judgment of the gods. He lingers in Middle-earth, very slowly, beginning with fair motives. The reorganizing and rehabilitation of the ruin of Middle-earth, neglected by the gods, he becomes a reincarnation of evil and a thing lusting for complete power, and so consumed ever more fiercely with hate, especially of gods and elves. All through the twilight of the Second Age, the shadow is growing in the east of Middle-earth, spreading its sway more and more over men, who multiply as the elves began to fade. The three main themes are thus the delaying elves that lingered in Middle-earth, Sauron's growth to a new Dark Lord, Master and God of men, and Númenór Atlantis. They are dealt with analytically and in two tales or accounts, the Rings of Power and the Downfall of Númenór. Both are the essential background to The Hobbit and its sequel. So, the Downfall of Númenór is one of the themes, along with the Rise of Sauron, is one of the themes of the Second Age. Mm-hmm. Sauron, with the downfall of Morgoth, at first, it sounds like he has every intention of truly repenting. It's just that he never follows through on it. Mm-hmm. Right? He doesn't take the necessary steps to really follow through on his repentance. And so he lingers in Middle-earth and slowly becomes corrupted and slowly starts to resent the Valar again. And before you know it, he just hates him and wants and is basically like Morgoth. But furthermore, in the Waldman letter on page XXI, Roman numeral 21, it says, the downfall is partly the result of an inner weakness in men, consequent, if you will, upon the first fall, unrecorded in these tales. That's interesting to me. We'll come back to that. Repented but not finally healed. Reward on earth is more dangerous for men than punishment. The fall is achieved by the cunning of Sauron in exploiting this weakness. Its central theme is, inevitably, I think, in the story of men, a ban or prohibition. The downfall is sort of so Akallabêth is sort of a meditation on man's weakness. Okay, and you can see it, right? Because we're not dealing with one characters who live for like 1,000 years, right? We're not dealing with somebody like Galadriel who goes on living through age after age after age. Right. We're not dealing with elves. We're dealing with men who, even though they're Númenóreans and they live like 3 times as long as normal men, they still die, right? Mm-hmm. And that does something to them and to the way they think and to the way they live their lives. Yes. There's a fear of death, right? Yeah. That's a problem for them. Yes. And Númenór, the story of Númenór is very much kind of a meditation on that, if you will. It's kind of it's just at the heart. It's at the heart of the story. And I find it really interesting that he talks about upon the first fall unrecorded in these tales, that the downfall is consequent upon the first fall, which is unrecorded in these tales. Repented but not finally healed. And that makes me think of when the men first came in the Silmarillion, when the men first came over the Blue Mountains into Beleriand. They talked about how there was kind of like this shadow that lay behind them, right? Which they didn't really know much about. Apparently men had been in existence for a while, but only recently had come into Beleriand. And they had kind of this rumor in their past that there was this fall that they experienced, but they didn't know many details of it.
Right, yes.
And so, again, I find it interesting that Tolkien is working in this... he really is, throughout his works, kind of working in his works into the scope of Christian mythology, right? Into the story of, into kind of the grand sweep of the Christian story, right? Yes. And it's funny to me because one of the things that went through my mind, I don't know if this crossed your mind at all. I know you were a little bored by this. This is the first time you've read Akallabêth, and I will say the first time I read it, probably a long time ago, I didn't really get it and was probably a little bored by it, but reading it this time, like it's just so rich. There's so much in it, and but one of the things that it struck me as, and one of the criticisms sometimes of the Silmarillion is that it's like biblical. It's like the Old Testament,
yeah,
and therefore difficult to read. But I was funny because I was thinking about it, like it's almost like Númenór is like this. It's like another Israel or something like that. It's like this chosen people. And it's like their story of like great heroes at first and all this kind of stuff, and there's their decline over time.
Interesting analogy, yeah. I can see that.
So anyway, just thinking about that, and then the way that Tolkien seems to want to fit this into a greater, Christian view of the history of mankind, right, and the history of the cosmos, right?
Yes.
And that's what I take him to mean by when he refers to the fall that's unrecorded in these tales.
Got
right?
it. Okay.
And I won't read this next thing in here. We'll just jump ahead to Akallabêth. Okay. All right. So Akallabêth. We start out and we are reminded of kind of the brief story of the first age. Which is the Eldar were struggling against Morgoth, right? The firstborn, the elves, were struggling against Morgoth, and men came into the world at the time of the Shadow, and they fell swiftly under his dominion. All right, so Morgoth, the Shadow is this thing, like it's the shadow of evil, and it's the thing that Morgoth brought into the world. It's this darkness he brought into the world. Okay, and he's managed to kind of like affect just about everything by it.
Right.
He sent in Morgoth early on, even before men can get in touch with the Valar and in touch with the Eldar, Morgoth is like he sends his emissaries among them, and they start to kind of look to him as if he's the god they should be worshiping. Right. It says they listened to his evil and cunning words, and they worshipped the darkness and yet feared it. But there were some that turned from evil and left the lands of their kindred and wandered ever westward. For they had heard a rumor that in the west there was a light which the shadow could not dim. And these eventually they journey into Beleriand, they become the elf friends, and they become known as the Edain.
Right.
The Edain. The most renowned of the Edain is, of course, Eärendil. And do you remember Eärendil's story?
Yeah, was that the last chapter of the Silmarillion? Yeah. I do remember it.
Well, good. You care to refresh us a bit on what you remember about it?
I remember he built a ship called Vingalot.
Right.
And because he wanted to travel to see the Valar.
Right.
And basically ask them to help.
Right.
The people he left behind.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he sails off into the sunset with his wife, and they never return from the
again.
again.
I can't remember this. So, do they sail off into the sunset, or is he by himself and she's like a bird?
Oh, she's a bird.
I can't remember if they go together or not. after they leave.
Like they left together.
But they don't sail off into the sunset. The ship goes into the sky, and that's where Eärendil. So he's that star in the sky.
I just wanted to say that he sailed off
into the sunset.
It sounds very fairy tale-ish.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so Eärendil is considered the greatest, the most renowned at least of the Edain.
Right.
And as a reward for his deeds and for the deeds of the other Edain, with the fall of Morgoth, the Edain are rewarded with this land that it's not actually it's not like on the shores or really even actually in sight of Valinor itself, but it's like halfway between Middle Earth and
Valinor.
But
Valinor.
It's
still closer to Valinor.
Well, it's definitely closer to Valinor, but even the light they can just glimpse from a distance that they think is Valinor is not actually Valinor. It's Erisea. It's the lonely island, right?
Right.
So. But it's this reward. It's this reward to them. They're granted a longer span of life than most men have.
Yeah.
And and at first they seem very grateful for it, right?
Yes. In fact, they named it the Land of Gift, right?
Yeah, the Land of Gift.
Yeah.
Now, the descendants of Eärendil. We have Elros and Elrond, right, and they're the half elven, right? They're both half elven, and Elrond, of course, and so being half elven, they get to choose which one they want to kind of throw in their lot with. Elrond chooses the elves.
Right.
Elros chooses men.
Right.
And so Elros is the first king of Númenór. Being the descendant of the great Eärendil, being the son of the great Eärendil. So even though Morgoth is gone, all right, even though he's Manwë has what does it say? Manwë has shut him beyond the world in the void that is without. He cannot himself return again into the world, present and visible, while the lords of the West are still enthroned. Yet the seeds that he had planted still grew and sprouted, bearing evil fruit if any would tend them. For his will remained and guided his servants, moving them ever to thwart the will of the Valar and to destroy those that obeyed them.
Those seeds he planted.
Yeah.
Those seeds of evil.
Mm-hmm. And his will remained as well.
Right.
So even though Morgoth himself is gone, there's still lots of evil going on in the world. There's still the potential for lots of evil to go on in the world. So that's an important note. And a land was made... we already covered that. All right, so it goes on to describe a little bit about this land of Númenór. And by the way, another word, because you'll hear Aragorn referred to as Dunedain, right? Mm-hmm. And that means that's another word for Númenóreans, right? That's the kings of men. The kings of men.
That's another word for Edain, then?
Yeah.
It is, okay.
Yeah. And so the chief city of Númenór, in the midst of its western coast, is called Adunye, because it faced the sunset, or Andunye, because it faced the sunset. And in the midst of that land was a mountain. In the midst of the land was a mountain tall and steep, and it was named the Meneltarma, the Pillar of Heaven. And upon it was a high place that was hallowed to Eru Ilúvatar. One of the things that's interesting to me about Númenór is how they have a religion. With the Eldar, I guess maybe in some sense they have a religion, though it's a very different from religion from what we're familiar with as human beings.
Right. Yeah.
But for men, so because the Eldar have actually been in touch, they've seen the Valar, right? They know the Valar, especially like the Noldor and the Teleri, and even the Sindar to a certain extent. So, for them, religion, it's hard to call it like what we think of as religion, because religion for us is about it's in large part about a mystery. It's about something that's revealed. So it's about a faith which we don't actually see with our own eyes, but we believe based on motives of credibility, right?
Yes.
For the Númenóreans and for men, they're in the same. I'm sorry. Yeah, for the elves, they see it all before them. But the Númenóreans, the men, are in the same position as we are, right? So theirs is more like religion, and it actually says that they worship. It was a place hallowed to Eärendil. So they literally worship the true God from this place. So this Mental Tarma is kind of their temple, right there.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's and that's important to keep in mind, because we're going to see that they're turned from kind of this right and proper worship of the true God of Eru. Eventually, this thing over time is perverted to be a worship of falsehood, right? And the other thing we learn is that they're sea voyagers, right? They start out and they're not about conquering lands; they're about going and discovering, right? They're about going out in the world and finding new things, and bringing, and part of that is going into different parts of going back to Middle Earth, right? Going back to the shores of Middle Earth where so many men still live, and it's almost like they're missionaries in a way, right? Because they're trying to establish these havens of true and good civilization over and against the people, the men who are still in darkness back in Middle Earth, right? Who, they're probably descendants of men who were following Morgoth before, right?
Right.
In lands other than Beleriand, who were under the shadow of Morgoth before. So in a way, they're trying to, they're sea voyagers, they're sea captains who go about discovering new parts of the world, and whatever men they find there, they kind of try to bring them civilization, try to bring them a different way of thinking and knowledge of the Valar and of Eärendil, right? So that's their mission early in life. So it's not like they're just sitting there okay, this is great, a lot of fun, we're just hanging out, we got it good. They're living the good life. Get with it.
I'm trying.
All right? Seriously. It's probably going to sound to people like I just smacked you or something like that.
Because you did.
Well, no, I didn't.
On the arm you did.
Oh, it's because you were like drifting. Like, oh, I'm so tired. You're so boring, John. Anyway.
Sorry, I'm trying.
So what was the last thing I said?
You said that their mission was to go and tell everybody about Eärendil.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They weren't just hanging out by the beach, sunning themselves and drinking margaritas like I would be if I was there.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I think there was some of that going on, but
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't waste a pretty sweet digs,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So, but they still have a problem.
Yeah.
And that problem is kind of summarized in the word the ban, right?
The ban.
Yeah. So what did you understand about the ban?
I understood they weren't supposed to travel. They weren't allowed to travel to a certain part of the world.
Yeah, where would that?
Well, I reread it 3 times to try and figure it out because I kept getting confused. But I think it was they weren't supposed to go to Valinor. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, the Blessed Realm, right? Okay.
Because I thought first they were supposed to go to Middle Earth, but then it talked about them going to Middle Earth, and I was like, wait, what? But then I realized, they're not supposed to go to Valinor, which is the other direction.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Lords of Valinor forbade them to sail, 262, but the Lords of Valinor forbade them to sail so far westward that the coast of Númenór could no longer be seen. And for long the Dunedain were content, though they did not fully understand the purpose of this ban. But the design of Manwë was that the Númenóreans should not be tempted to seek for the Blessed Realm, nor desire to overpass the limits set to their bliss, becoming enamored of the immortality of the Valar and the Eldar and the lands where all things endure. For in those days Valinor still remained in the world visible, and there Ilúvatar permitted the Valar to maintain upon earth an abiding place, a memorial of that which might have been if Morgoth had not cast his shadow on the world. This the Númenóreans knew full well, and at times, when all the air was clear and the sun was in the east, they could look out and descry far off to the west a city white shining on a distant shore and a great harbor and a tower. and they understood this ban. They early on they abode by this ban, that this was something they weren't allowed to journey into the west, into the Deathless Lands, and
they were okay with it.
Yeah, right. And that's when it talks about they journeyed back to the east into Middle Earth. And they come to the shores of the Great Lands, and they took pity on the forsaken world of Middle Earth. And the lords of Númenór set foot again upon the western shores in the dark years of men, and none yet dared to withstand them. And they come bringing them gifts, right? Corn and wine they brought, and they instructed men in the sowing of seed. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the grinding of grain, and the hewing of wood, and the shaping of stone, and in the ordering of their life, such as it might be in the lands of swift death and little bliss. And the men of Middle Earth were comforted, and here and there upon the western shores the houseless woods drew back, and men shook off the yoke of the offspring of Morgoth and unlearned their terror of the dark. But as the years go on, and there's a lot of years that go on, all right, because they live, the Númenóreans live 200 to 300 years,
right?
On average, and they get a taste for how good life can be, right? And they also know that the Eldar live a long time, actually forever, right? They live forever, and so they start to hunger for the undying city that they saw from afar, the desire of everlasting life, to escape from death and the ending of delight, and this all grew strong upon them. And even as their power and glory grew greater, their unquiet increased. It's interesting to me because I feel like that's very true to human. The more we kind of have it good in life, the more we and we pause to reflect on how good we have it in life. We have that room. The more our hearts start to grasp that, and be like, but I don't want to have to let it go.
Yeah.
We slowly kind of become enslaved to all those things.
Yes.
Instead of having them free, right? So it's interesting to think of Númenór as the land of gift, because it's freely given. It's this freely given gift. It's not meant to be something that enslaves them, but slowly it seems to kind of take hold of their hearts, right?
Yeah.
And they want to live forever. And eventually they say, and why did the lords of the West sit there in peace unending, while we must die and go we know not whither, leaving our home and all that we have, all we have made? And the Eldar die not, even those that rebelled against the lords. And since we have mastered all seas, and no water is so wild or so wide that our ships cannot overcome it, why should we not go to Awakens and greet there our friends? And remember, Awakens is the city in Tol Eressëa, so this is the city of the Eldar, there in Tol Eressëa.
Right. Which, I mean, in and of itself, why not go say hi to your friends? Yeah.
Well, but it's interesting to me that they say that they've mastered all the seas, but they don't know that really, and there's still plenty of land. It sounds like if you look at the map of the entirety of Arda, there's still plenty of land to the east that they have not journeyed into yet. Most likely, it just basically kind of says they kind of make their way into the coasts of Middle Earth,
right?
But there's a lot of land that goes way beyond that. A lot of people, so it's like there's still these missions to do, and it may not all be at sea, but it's like there's still a lot that has to be done, right? And so again they say, why should we not envy the Valar, or even the least of the deathless? For of us is required a blind trust and a hope without assurance, knowing not what lies before us in a little while, and yet we also love the earth and would not lose it. And this is something we've talked about a couple of times, this hope without assurance. Again, if talking about the idea that this all kind of fits into, that in Tolkien's mind, this whole story kind of fits into a greater Christian story, a greater Christian scheme.
Right.
Okay. Go back and revisit some of our earlier episodes if you want to know more of what I'm saying there. I'm not saying that this is all an allegory for Christianity. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in Tolkien's mind, this mythology fits into the story that Christianity tells about mankind.
Right.
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 And he intended it to be so. So it's interesting to think about that hope without assurance when, we find Tolkien and on fairy stories talking about the incarnation being the great eucatastrophe of human history.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that was the turning point for man, right? That was where, and the resurrection especially, as the eucatastrophe of the incarnation, that at that moment we cease to be without assurance, right?
Yes.
We now have a hope that's based on an actual man rising from the dead, of overcoming death, right? Overcoming evil and death. So here the Númenóreans are crying out about that, and they're saying, like, what in the world is awaiting us on the other side, right? Yeah. What is all this about? Why do we have to die, and you guys don't?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. This just strikes me right to the heart, because how many tears do we cry in this life over that very question of, like, why do we have to die? We all lose, and that's part of the reason I love this story so much. Is like, Tolkien lost friends in World War One. I'm sure he knew people who knew people who died in World War Two. And his own mother died. His own parents died when he was young.
Right.
He barely knew his father. His mother died when he was a young man. There's this ache of, like, just the sting of death.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Within and within him, and to kind of see that borne out in this story of, I wish someone would tell us what the game is here. What the end result is. I'd really love to know. But you're just telling us we just have to trust. Yeah. Trust Iluvatar.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Trust that he's got a plan in store.
Yeah.
And at first for the Edain, who, for the early generations of the Edain, who maybe have this, who especially the first few generations who were able to be a witness to Eärendil and the downfall of Morgoth and all these kinds of things. They have that memory of the deliverance and the power that the Valar have and the power of Iluvatar.
Yes.
But as they get further and further away from that, it's like, is that all just myth? Is that all just a story, that was made up? Is that really what we're going to spend our lives worrying about? Or maybe we just need to spend our lives living it up, drinking margaritas on the beach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can see the progression, this slide starting to begin here, with this this envy of the Valar. The messengers from the Valar do say, "Indeed, the mind of Iluvatar concerning you is not known to us, and he has not revealed all things that are to come. But this we hold to be true, that your home is not here, neither in the land of Aman, nor anywhere within the circles of the world." Tell you what, you read the rest of that in the Doom of Men.
Yes. And the doom of men, that they should depart, was at first a gift of Iluvatar. It became a grief to them, only because, coming under the shadow of Morgoth, it seemed to them that they were surrounded by a great darkness, of which they were afraid, and some grew wilful and proud and would not yield until life was reft from them. We who bear the ever-mounting burden of the years do not clearly understand this, but if that grief has returned to trouble you, as you say, then we fear that the shadow arises once more and grows again in your hearts. Therefore, though you be the Dunedain, fairest of men, who escaped from the shadow of old and fought valiantly against it, we say to you, beware. The will of Eru may not be gainsaid, and the Valar bid you earnestly not to withhold the trust to which you are called, lest soon it become again a bond by which you are constrained. Hope rather that in the end even the least of your desires shall have fruit. The love of Arda was set in your hearts by Iluvatar, and he does not plant to no purpose. Nonetheless, many ages of men unborn may pass ere that purpose is made known, and to you it will be revealed, and not to the Valar.
Yeah, so it's almost like the Valar don't know. They don't know the answer for men.
Yeah.
Right? We've looked at this in past episodes, but men are a mystery to the Valar and the Eldar.
Right.
Right? The Eldar are much more like the Valar in certain ways and understand them a lot better because of their immortality than men are capable of.
Right.
And basically the argument is that the love of Arda was set in your hearts by Iluvatar, and he does not plant to no purpose.
Yeah.
You know, so again, what might that be? What might that purpose ultimately be? Well, you know, if indeed, you know, that argument that Tolkien intends this to fit into the greater Christian story is true here, is true of what's being said here, then, you know, we know the new heavens and the new earth, right, is part of that story, right? That's the end result.
Yeah.
That's the great hope that that the Christian story looks forward to.
Right.
That in the end, it's not just that, you know, people die and go to heaven. It's that heaven and earth will meet, and that all of creation will be restored and glorified, right?
Yeah.
Into this greater thing. So you know, we see the downfall beginning here, and in the midst of this, two parties start to arise among the Númenóreans. You have the Kingsmen, all right, and the Kingsmen are kind of the powerful, fat and happy, like let's live it up kind of party.
Yeah. And
then you have the elf friends, the Eärendil.
Right.
Eärendil. And they're trying to keep the faith, basically. They're saying like, let's stay the course, let's trust, let's stay true to the Númenórean ways of old. And the Kingsmen, more and more it becomes about wealth and dominion in Middle Earth.
Right.
And this is really interesting. What had started out as them going to Middle Earth to help these other men who once were under the, you know, Morgoth's shadow and still were suffering because of those things and the things they had learned from him, the ways of being they had learned from him. You know, they're living in this darkness. And at first, the Númenóreans go and they're able to shed light. They're able to give them light and good and like civilization, new ways of living, good things.
Yeah.
And now it slowly becomes about dominion and power over them and extracting. You know, it doesn't talk anything, and it doesn't talk about any of this in here. But part of me wonders, like, if, you know, they even started to think like, okay, well, some of those folks might make some convenient slaves for us. You know, like even, you know, wonder if there was like a slave trade, you know, beginning. You know, where it was just like, well, let's go capture some of those forest, you know, some of those wild and woolly forest men. I bet they'd make good laborers for our fields, so we can, you know, so we don't have to work ourselves and, you know, can reap all the benefits.
Yeah, maybe.
But, you know, it goes from this mentality of like helping them to exploiting them.
Yes.
Exploiting them in their weakness, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's a slow little progression there. So we have the Kingsmen and the Eärendil, the elf friends.
Yes.
All the while, Sauron's in the picture. As we talked about before, Sauron, you know, he kind of seemed to repent at first after the downfall of Morgoth, but it turns out not to be true. And he establishes Mordor in these days during the reign of the 11th king. So this is about, you know, this is somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years into the time of Númenór, into the Second Age at this point. So a lot of time has passed since the end of the Silmarillion at this point, when Sauron, you know, establishes himself in the land of Mordor, builds his Tower of Barad-dûr, and seeks to take dominion over Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Okay. And he hates the Númenóreans, and he starts to devise his own schemes to get at them. It talks a little bit about the rings. We'll actually learn more about the story of the rings when we do of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, on a separate episode. Okay. Maybe a couple episodes there too. And that's the last bit in this book. Right?
Okay, got it.
So we have this new king come along, the 20th king, and he is named Adunachor, and Lord of the West. And he forsakes the Elven tongue. So he literally, I mean, you know, he just comes right out and breaks faith with, you know, the elves, with the Valar, everybody. And he just totally, he names himself Lord of the West, which is the name of the Valar. So it's like a strike right at them.
But yeah,
right?
Definitely a slap in the face.
Yeah. It's kind of a way of saying, we don't need you guys. We can do this all ourselves. Yeah. And not too much longer after that, a couple more generations pass, and we have Ar-Pharazôn. And he is Ar-Pharazôn the Golden, and he's a bad dude. First of all, he marries his cousin Miriel. He forces his cousin Miriel to marry him, right, against her will, and then he decides that Sauron is getting too powerful over there in Middle-earth. He's taking all the good slaves for himself, maybe, and he decides that he's going to go and show Sauron a thing or two. So we're expecting this big battle to come along.
Yeah.
We're expecting there to be this big to-do, like, you know, the
knock him down, drag him out.
Yeah, the War of Wrath Part 2, right? But he shows up in Middle-earth. He goes knocking on Sauron's door, and it says, "Even from his mighty tower of Barad-dûr, Sauron came and made no offer of battle. For he perceived that the power and majesty of the kings of the sea surpassed all rumor of them, so that he could not trust even the greatest of his servants to withstand them. And he saw not this time yet to work his will with the Dunedain. And he was crafty, yet well skilled to gain what he would by subtlety, when force might not avail. Therefore he humbled himself before Ar-Pharazôn, and smoothed his tongue. And men wondered, for all that he had said seemed fair and wise. But Ar-Pharazôn was not yet deceived, and it came into his mind that for the better keeping of Sauron and of his oaths of fealty, he should be brought to Númenór, there to dwell as a hostage for himself and all his servants in Middle-earth. To this Sauron assented as one constrained, yet in his secret thought he received it gladly, for it chimed indeed with his desire. And Sauron passed over the sea and looked upon the land of Númenór, and on the city of Armanelos in the days of its glory, and he was astounded. But his heart within was filled the more with envy and hate."
So why did he just give himself up like that? I don't understand.
Well, it basically says that that the army that Ar-Pharazôn came with was like...
just too intimidating?
Yeah.
Really? It's too intimidating for, like, the Dark Lord's right-hand man? Like, I don't understand why he just rolled over and played dead.
Well, first of all, he came with a pretty great army, and so
sure.
Sauron's options were like, okay, well, I can try to withstand him, but I might not be powerful enough.
Okay.
Right? Because by all accounts, you know, we find out that Ar-Pharazôn had a pretty incredible army. And, you know, even in, like, Lord of the Rings, Sauron operates covertly for most of that story because he's not capable of really taking the war on the full scale that he wants to at the beginning of the book, right? He wants to get the ring back, and then he thinks he'll be ready. So Sauron may be great, but he's constrained as well. He's constrained by realities, right?
Okay.
And it can sometimes be hard to muster an army from a bunch of people who are really unwilling, or you're just kind of forcing to fight for you,
right?
Right.
I wonder why this guy, this Ar-Pharazôn guy, thought it'd be a good idea, though, to bring this horribly bad person back to Númenór.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Isn't that why we have places like, what's it called? You know, that prison. Like Alcatraz.
Alcatraz?
Right, and then that other one for military people, starts with a G.
Well, like I said, so keep your friends close, your enemies closer. Sauron did willingly give himself up. It's not like they fought a war and then Sauron gave himself up. Sauron just came right out and gave himself up. So
prisoner of war, basically.
Yeah. So, and you know, it also talks about that Sauron was pretty smooth.
Yeah. So
Sauron's very smooth. Like in the movies, Lord of the Rings films, you get this picture of Sauron as like this like demonic looking figure. But a lot of the art that you'll find, like fan art that you'll find of Sauron, and just different things you see about him is he's a smooth operator, right? He's like, you know, like Lucifer. He's a beautiful creature, right?
Yeah.
The armor he wears looks very intimidating, but he himself is, you know, a beautiful creature to look at. And he's also very well spoken, smooth with his words, right? And he understands people too. He understands how to speak to them. So he plays Ar-Pharazôn, right? In whatever way that means, right? And it would be great. See, part of the reason you probably found this a little boring is because there's lots of stuff in here that, like, if you like took a magnifying glass and just spent time reading about that story, it's like, you could probably write a book on Ar-Pharazôn against Sauron and how that all played out, how this story all plays out. Mm-hmm. And in here, it's just a couple of pages.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But, I mean, it's a good question. Like, why did Ar-Pharazôn, didn't he see this coming? And the answer is no. Sauron was too smooth. Sauron, this is a chess match. And Sauron, made the right move.
Yeah.
He was calculating, he made the moves he needed to make in order to accomplish the long-term designs he wanted to make, or he wanted to achieve. And so he goes back, and over time, he goes from being this adversary that's in check to almost like an advisor, right?
Yeah.
It says, "Such was the cunning of Sauron's." Go ahead and read here. Such was the cunning.
Yet such was the cunning of his mind and mouth, and the strength of his hidden will, that ere 3 years had passed, when he had passed, he had become closest to the secret counsels of the king. For flattery sweet as honey was ever on his tongue, and knowledge he had of many things, yet unrevealed to men. And seeing the favor that he had of their lord, all the counselors began to fawn upon him, save one alone, Eärendil, lord of Undunier. Then slowly a change came over the land, and the hearts of the elf friends were sorely troubled, and many fell away out of fear. And although those that remained still called themselves the faithful, their enemies named them rebels. For now, having the ears of men, Sauron with many arguments gainsaid all that the Valar had taught. And he bade men think that in the world, in the east, and even in the west, there lay yet many seas and many lands for their winning, wherein wealth was uncounted. And still, if they should at the last come to the end of those lands and seas, beyond all lay the ancient darkness. And out of it the world was made, for darkness alone is worshipful, and the Lord thereof may yet make other worlds to be gifts to those that serve him, so that the increase of their power shall find no end.
And Ar-Pharazôn said, "Who is the Lord of the darkness?" And to me, that's like the key line in the whole story, right? Because that's where you see Sauron, like, slowly, he's just working him, right? He's working him, and ultimately, what he wants to do is he's trying to get Ar-Pharazôn to turn his heart to the worship of Morgoth, right? To the worship of the darkness,
yes.
Right? And basically to Satanism, right? To this kind of like, almost like a satanic cult,
Yeah.
So.
And he totally just like Satan in the Garden of Eden, right?
Yeah.
He appeals to their desire to want to be greater than God, right?
Mm-hmm.
To rule and become wealthy and be be powerful and all that.
Mm-hmm. For having the ears of men, Sauron with many arguments gainsaid all that the Valar had taught, and he bade them. So here he is. He's like the greatest false prophet, right? Mm-hmm. He really is. Like he's kind of telling them the things they want to hear. He's telling them there's all these lands that you can go see, and even if you reach the ends of all those lands, there's still the darkness to explore. And so there's your religion, there's your cult, there's your new cult for them, right?
Yeah.
Is the darkness. And I just love like this childlike, like here's this great, Ar-Pharazôn the Golden, the great king of men, the great king of Númenór, and he's just looking up at Sauron being like, "Oh, wonderful Lord Sauron, tell me, who is the Lord of the Darkness?" Like a little kid,
Yeah.
Like this curious little kid. Here he is, just a few years earlier, he's going up against Sauron knowing that he's this bad guy, and now he's just like, "Lord Sauron, who is the Lord of the Darkness? Tell me more."
Sauron totally
he's like sitting on his knee, It's like he's sitting on his knee, like getting taught by him,
Yep.
So, Sauron is like, "I'm glad you asked. It is he whose name is not now spoken, for the Valar have deceived you concerning him, putting forward the name of Eru, a phantom devised in the folly of their hearts, seeking to enchain men in servitude to themselves. For they are the oracle of this Eru, which speaks only what they will. But he that is their master shall yet prevail, and he will deliver you from this phantom. And his name is Melkor, Lord of all, giver of freedom, and he shall make you stronger than they." Lord of all, giver of freedom, right? Eru is a phantom. He's not real, but and Melkor is where it's at, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sauron.
It's just a fascinating kind of progression through this story.
Yes.
And so the last paragraph before we leave off for our part one of the discussion, it says, Ar-Pharazôn turned back to the worship of the dark. And this is what men were worshiping before, right? This was what they were indoctrinated in after the original fall, which we don't know anything about in the scope of this story.
Okay.
Except that it's this thing that lies in their past, and it's this shadow that weighs upon them, right? This is what the Edain escaped in the first place, right? Was the worship of Melkor, of Morgoth. But now they're turned back to it. But ere long, openly, he worshipped him in the face of his people, and they, for the most part, followed him. But there's the faithful. The faithful refuse to engage in that, and the chief among them, to whom they looked for leading and courage in evil days, was Amandil, counselor of the king, and his son Eärendil, whose sons were Isildur and Anarion. Then young men by the reckoning of Númenór. Amandil and Eärendil were great ship captains, and they were of the line of Elros Tarmeniatur, though not of the ruling house, to whom belong the crowns and the throne in the city of Armanelos. So they are descended from Elros. They're descended from the line of Elros and Eärendil. And though he was of the elf friends, he remained in his council until the coming of Sauron. Now he was dismissed, for Sauron hated him above all others in Númenór. But he was so noble and had been so mighty a captain of the sea that he was still held in honor by many of the people, and neither the king nor Sauron dared to lay hands on him as yet. So our hero at this point is Amandil.
Yes.
Amandil and his son Eärendil, and his sons Isildur and Isildur's brother.
Right.
Anarion.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Phew.
I don't know. Does that help at all? Like, do you have more of an appreciation for the story,
absolutely. Well, I don't know if I have more of an appreciation for it, but I follow it a bit better, I guess. I was just very confused by the whole thing.
Well, I think it is confusing the first time you read it, and hopefully for those who haven't read it before, maybe listen to this episode beforehand.
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful.
Mm-hmm. But I hope the rest of it is more enjoyable for you now that you have had a chance to think about the first part of what you read more.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Anything I skipped that you thought was interesting or anything like that?
No.
It's really dense. It's super dense. And that's part of the problem too.
I couldn't pronounce like any of the names. I was just like, no, I think you did a good job.
Okay.
Kind of hitting all the high points.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh boy.
But you didn't do a haiku, did you?
I didn't do a haiku.
Boo.
Sorry, I'm
Well,
rebellious.
At least Rob Fangman did one.
Well, maybe did you do more than one? I'll claim one of yours.
Oh wait,
mine.
maybe Josh did one. I think he did actually. Maybe he didn't.
If he didn't, well, if he did, can we just say that it's mine?
I've got one. Let's see. Let's see here.
What are you looking for?
I'm trying to look up Josh on Twitter because he sometimes sends me haikus on Twitter.
Oh.
Well, I don't know. Whatever. Twitter's being stupid slow. Okay. That's really my internet connection. All right. So, I'm gonna read Rob's first. So, Rob Fangman coming at us with a haiku for this episode.
Sweet.
Both lordly and wise, above all men they were held, yet bound by man's doom.
Yeah. That's good.
Good stuff, Rob.
It's really good.
I'm also going to read another longer thing by Rob that he wrote concerning Aragorn.
Oh.
I mentioned that last time.
Oh, yes, you did. Yes, you did.
So, but I'll come back to that after I read mine. Tell you what, I'll let you read the first one and pretend like it's yours.
Is it the better one?
I don't know.
I want to read the better one. Let me read them both real quick.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you which one I want to read. I'm going to read the second one.
Okay. Wait, that mean I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. Sea kings lose the light. In the shadow, they learn to worship the darkness.
I
Gotcha.
I want to do the second one. Oh, well.
Gotcha.
Sea kings lose the light. In the shadow, they learn to worship the darkness. It's really good. I like that.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
And then I've got...
Oh, do you want me to read your other one?
You can.
I don't know how to pronounce that word.
Bright Avalane, too stern with glory, a hint of the eternal.
Too stern with glory. What does that mean?
I don't know. What do you think it means?
I have no idea. That's why I asked you.
Well, I don't like to come right out and say what it means. I want you to think about it.
What was in Avalane, where they live?
Avalane is the it's the city on Tol Eressëa.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
All right, good. I like them both.
Good. Well, I'm glad you like them.
Yeah, you did a good job.
All right, I'm gonna read Rob's poem on Aragorn.
Right on.
All right. In the house of Elrond, as Estel he was known, true identity kept hidden until manhood fully grown. In Rivendell he walked, as if in ages long ago. To Nuviel he called to her true name he did not know. Arwen Undomiel she was, far above his kind. To earn her hand he labored hard, strengthening the mind. Far and wide he journeyed, and in many guises travelled. With Gandalf he took counsel, the enemy's devices to unravel. To destroy Sauron's evil, ferociously he fought. Great stature and great wisdom, with age was dearly bought. He came once more to Arwen, her love she gave to he. But Elrond wept with sadness, for immortal no longer would she be. Before their love finds rest, a debt must first be paid, the Dark Lord to throw down, his power be unmade. In a company of 9 he went, they sought to destroy the ring. Against evil they were victorious, and again there was a king. To Arwen he was wed, the age of men was born. Till Contar was his house, King Elisar Aragorn.
It's very good.
Outstanding, good job.
Really, really good.
Nicely done, Rob, love it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Alright, well, I think that's a wrap on this episode.
I would agree.
Next episode, Akallabêth, part 2.
Yep.
Hopefully we'll get through the rest of it.
I hope so.
And if you want to do haiku for that one, you're free to. Just try and get it in before, let's see, what's today? The 9th?
9th, yeah.
So, try and have it in by, let me do some math, by the 14th, which will be next Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right on.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yes, thank you, guys.
We shall talk at you next time.
Yep. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Please remember to check out truemyths.org for show notes and plenty of other Tolkien goodness. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, would you please leave the Tolkien Road a rating and feedback on iTunes? It's a great way to support the show and takes less than a minute. On our next episode, we'll finish our walkthrough of Akallabêth. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, the road goes ever on.